What's going on, y'all? This is Lecrae. I'm right here on the Peace of Mind podcast, man. Listen, you need a peace of mind, you can have peace of mind. You dig? Let's go.
Peace, family, and welcome back to another episode of the Peace of Mind podcast, where every episode is a lesson. We're never selected with our perspective. Today, man, big day for us. We're blessed to be in the presence and the essence of a legend here, man. You know, hailing all the way from H-Town. Shout out to H-Town. But he's been around a little bit. Yeah. He's been around a little bit, man. San Diego, Tennessee. We in Atlanta right now, man. But seven-time Grammy nomination, 2-time winner. He's a father. He's an actor. He's a husband, philanthropist, businessman. I mean, hey, man, legend here, Lecrae.
It's a pleasure, man. Appreciate you, man.
Yes, sir. We're honored to have you on the Peace of Mind podcast.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You know, maybe the first of many. Who knows?
Yeah, man.
You know what I'm saying?
So we're here at Reach Records in Atlanta, Georgia. Rel, you want to talk about how we set this up, man?
Oh, yeah. Well, let's just take it back to me.
Okay.
Obviously, we got a little bit of history.
For sure.
I seen you back in March this year in Raleigh, NC. And when I approached you, you said, "Hey, bro, you look very familiar, bro. Where I know you from?" But then you said my name, Rel. I said, "Yeah, bro, it's me." But I told you, I said, "Hey, man, we got the podcast now, and I would love to have you on the podcast and whatnot." And then you said, "All right, for sure. Just reach out to the management, Flex."
Yeah.
Shout out to Jalen in the background too. So did all the theatrics, and now we're here. And I was also an intern for Reach back in 2020. Came down, learned a lot about the label because I got my own label on the side. Mm-hmm. But I learned a lot down here. Shout out to Mr. Logan. Shout out to the rest of the Reach Records team. And yeah, it's just been ever since, just been love. Big Christian hip hop fan. My pops, shout out to my dad. Love you, and we here.
So, he put you on? Pops put you on?
Early on, bro.
What's up? Shout out to Pops.
Since the Real Talk.
Oh,
and,
man.
And Rebel days.
Sheesh.
Man. So we've been doing this for a long time.
That's what's up.
A long time.
Respect.
You had in an interview where you were talking about a lot of the rappers these days, they speak on their trauma. They live through their trauma, and their success is based on that trauma. And it's through debauchery, the indulgence of sensual pleasures. Mm-hmm. I think that's another problem we have in our community because we praise all these false, egotistical heights of success. And we're deluding our youth with thinking this is what real life looks like. This is what you should shoot for. But going back to something else you said, I believe it was in Southside Rap, I said, well, the thing that I'm rooted in is something that is eternal that you cannot take away. Yeah. But if you take that away from other artists, they're not going to know what to do, which is why a lot of people with money end up killing themselves or are always doped up on drugs. Yeah. Speak to how we can incorporate more people like yourself and the people at Reach Records and push that positivity out there versus garnishing so much negativity or attention to negativity.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is practical. It's just practical wisdom. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can get spiritual with it because everything has a spiritual undertone, but just on a practical level, like, if you plant a seed and you water it and the sun hit it, it's gonna grow. That's just practical wisdom. You know what I'm saying? So in the same regard, you know what I'm saying, if you cultivate healthy relationships with people, you treat them well, you know what I mean, put them in environments where they can thrive, they're gonna thrive. Mm-hmm. And so if we keep praising people, like a lot of us don't have to live the life that NBA Youngboy lived. Mm-hmm. But we keep highlighting NBA Youngboys and not highlighting other folks who, what black kid at 23 that's developed an app? Why we ain't highlighting him? Why we don't talk about him? You know what I mean? I'm not taking nothing away from the folks who in the midst of the turmoil and who rose up out of the mud, but all of us that's not everybody's story. And we gotta start telling the stories of the folks who didn't have to get shot or go to prison in order to be successful. You know what I mean? Like, y'all sitting here and it ain't because, you know what I'm saying, y'all had to go to prison to get to your podcast popping. You know what I mean? So it's like, man, we need to do more of that. You know, highlight more of those things instead of just always highlighting those underdog stories. We love telling that story, but it's like that's what paints a picture of us.
Definitely. I think that is, I mean, even J. Cole has a song called No Role Models. And he talks about, you know, basically the same thing that we're saying outside of the basketball players, outside of, you know, the moguls that will take forever for the average man to reach. What role models do we have? And I mean, I have a younger sister that's 12. Nadia, I love you. But I always just try to make sure I'm a positive role model for her and expose her to more than just, you know, the things she's going to see on the internet. Because if you go on the internet, you know, you're just seeing the girls on there dancing. You're seeing rappers. You know, there's no necessary positive role models of something that I don't want to say is easily achievable, but something that you could work towards achieving and not having to go down the wrong path to say.
Yeah, big facts.
But I did want to say something about what you said earlier when we were talking about healing in the black community. One of the things that my generation, because there's so many distractions now with the internet and you know, just where we are in technology right now, one of the things that I hear a lot of people in my generation say is that, you know, we're more spiritual than religious. And then also at this point in time, I believe we actually have some of the highest rates of suicide. So, you know, one of the things that you had said in CC4 is it's people confused, so they pray to the universe. Yeah. So I thought that was just deep because, you know, I hear, like I said, I hear a lot of that in my generation, and you know, my generation is focused on breaking generational curses. So things that our grandparents may believed, you know, we're kind of trying to move away from that, but some things may be right. And I do think that those increased rates that we're seeing is because people are getting away from God. What was your perspective on that?
That's a great question, man. Man, where do we even begin? Where do we begin? You know, there's always gonna be, okay, so end of the day, what God does in a society is God forces people to have to deal with their brokenness, right? Because he's the standard. And he forces people to have to deal with their brokenness. People don't like dealing with their brokenness. They want to blame the brokenness of this world on something.
I'm following you.
Something.
Right. Yeah.
But if I acknowledge there's a God, then I also got to acknowledge my position in light of this God. You know what I'm saying? And that's where the problem comes up. So what people will do is they'll put all the brokenness, they'll blame it on politics, or they'll blame it on society or whatever it is. Now, do they contribute to the brokenness in society? For sure. But they're symptoms of a bigger picture than they are the real issue. So now, when you remove God from the equation, now your morality does not have any, it's wherever, you can pick the starting point. So we more relative. This is why everybody talking about, well, that's your truth. Well, that's your truth. What if my truth says your truth is a lie? Who's true? Who's true now? You know what I'm saying? And so when you start talking about God, now people have to be responsible for their own actions, and people don't like that. So I can say the universe because it makes it easier. I could say politicians because it makes it easier. But when I start talking about God, well, now which God is it? Because now I'm responsible for figuring out which God it is, and then I got to live up to whatever particular God that I say I believe in. I got to wrestle with these realities. So you gonna see a lot of darkness, a lot of brokenness, because if you don't have a God, then you just a cosmic accident. You just the result of atoms and molecules. That means you don't have no purpose.
And even connecting it to our conversation, a point in our conversation earlier about the no role models. If you have God, you have a role model. It's like you said, this is a standard that you're living up to. So if you don't have a God and you saying I'm praying to the universe, then you're free. You're all over the place. You don't have a structure.
Exactly.
So God adds structure to it.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? I can at least deal with my brokenness and know I have room to grow if I know there's a moral standard. But if I don't have that, I do what I want to do. And then I end up in some detrimental situations that cause me a lot of pain and suffering. You know what I mean?
It's funny because you mentioned that I'm gonna take it back, on Rebel, on Truth.
Yeah.
Oh, so what if your truth says it's a lie? Is it still true?
Right.
Man, and I said, yo, like that's very relevant because, you know, people feel like they have the answers.
Right.
Like, hey man, like I said, like, hey man, like my way is your way, you're going to hell, and it's like, no. That's not, like, you can't force your philosophy onto somebody else because of how you feel. Like the only true way that we're gonna have real solutions is just having like these one-on-one conversations.
Yeah. You got to have the conversations because you don't know where a person is coming from. You don't know what experiences have shaped them. And a lot of times, especially, you know, no shade to my Christian brothers and sisters, but a lot of times Christians expect a person to just change their whole way of thinking in an instant. You know what I'm saying? Like, I told them what I believe, change. You know, it's like, man, I've been living this way for 27 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
sure,
you just
for
expect
sure.
this.
For sure.
I believe God is powerful and he got power to change, but change is a process.
Right.
You know, it's a process, my boy. It ain't just bam. You know what I mean?
Well, let me play God's advocate. I want to give you some pushback on something you said about truth. So, fundamentally, the way that I approach my spirituality is that I understand that we all have different interpretations of what's being shown to our eyes. AKA, you know, something else I like that you said is how you had to get away from westernization of religion and go to the Eastern context, because that's exactly what happened for me. Yeah. And just understanding that everybody has different truths, but those different truths cultivate the one singular reality. What would your response be to that if we don't have our individual truths, if we have to rely on the outside reality truth, how would we go about that?
Yeah, it's kind of like when people say, you know, if I got the tail and I got the ear of an elephant, it's all still the same elephant. I just am holding on to a different component of it. And I get that. You know what I'm saying? I get that. The issue becomes when the tail says it's not an elephant and the ear says yes it is. So that's where the tension lies, and once you start getting down to a place where, you know, because we could take Christianity off the table. Let's just use Islam, right? When you say Islam and Buddhism, well, it's all the same, right? Islam gonna say no, it ain't. And when you really start studying what Islam is, they're gonna be like, no, don't you ever get it twisted. That ain't us. And so now you got incompatibility, and they would say, nah, this ain't true. And they're gonna say, well, this ain't true. So you do have to wrestle with some sense of exclusivity, and that's okay. You know, like I don't, like, you know what I mean? Like when we date, I mean, and not trying to put nobody in, but I'll just use myself as an example. I like women. I don't like men. That's not my truth. That's the truth. You know what I'm saying? I don't, like, you can't say, well, that's his truth. He does like women. No, I don't. I mean, he does like men. No, I don't. I don't like men. I like women. So, and that's okay that I'm exclusive in that view, because that's my reality, you know. So you can't try to make it, well, he just doesn't understand that he likes men. He just don't know he likes. You can't try to fudge with that. That's what it is.
I get what you're saying. You can't force your belief down somebody else's throat. You can't do that. That goes to what you said earlier about how our Christian brothers and sisters expect people to change in a moment.
Yeah.
Something we were just speaking about and we talk about all the time is that I feel like the reason that we are not all religious these days and more spiritual is because we didn't have leaders in our past generations to lead us into salvation. We had people that tried to judge us into salvation, and because they tried to judge us into salvation, now we're out here in pretty much a cosmic accident. We're just a composition of atoms and molecules, right? And so we have no sense of direction. And so since we weren't taught how to follow, we couldn't submit to that authority. We also don't know how to be in authority. And that's something you said. And because we are leaderless, we're leaderless internally and externally. And that's where the conundrum we have with our generation is right now.
And the only thing I would add to that is that at some point in time, everyone is going to have to wrestle with exclusivity. And that's all I'm saying is, listen, faith makes exclusive claims. Every faith does, like most of them do. There's exclusive claims, and you're gonna have to wrestle with those. And I just think we are so afraid, we're so like, in the name of tolerance, we're so afraid of exclusivity, we don't wanna touch that. You know what I'm saying? But I'm okay with that. I got Jewish homies and they like, Jesus is not the Messiah. They believe that to the core of their being. I'm okay with that because I know where they are. You know what I'm saying? They not dancing. At least we can start to discuss and see, okay, why do you believe that? And they can ask me, well, why do I believe he is?
So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Lecrae, being that you're obviously a leader in Christian hip hop and in the Christian faith, your story is a little bit different than a lot of African Americans that are raised here, because we come from a heritage of a lot of times Christianity, whether it's AME, Episcopal, all those different denominations. But, typically we come from where religion and Christianity is being forced on us. And a lot of times when we get older, we go off to college, we get on our own, our views start to change a little bit on how we see Christianity, especially, coming up in the education system. A lot of our elders, bless them, but they didn't go that far in the school system. I got grandparents that didn't go past 6th, 7th grade. So, a lot of times our perspectives start to change as we get older. Is there anything that, I know you kind of went to Christianity as you got older, but is there anything that you looked at when you got older and was like, hey, I don't know about this one?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I do believe it's a both and. I do think that scholarship and education is very important, especially as you start to deal with philosophical or spiritual things. But on the flip side, I also think that culturally we can tend to follow our white counterparts in what I would call both intellectual snobbery, chronological snobbery, and just like the idea of the Enlightenment, where they felt like education was the highest form of existence. And because of that, I think there's a tendency to look down on folks who may not have had the same amount of education, but are very wise. And so, yes, I think grandma and them, my grandma only made it to, she stopped going to school at 13. You know what I'm saying? So yes, I think grandma and them could have benefited from the scholarship and education that we had. However, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times they had more wisdom than they had knowledge. They knew better. And they knew how to do stuff. And I think it was kind of like they just didn't have the educational undergirdings to explain it. They'd be like, hey, don't do that. But it's like that. Give me a better way to articulate what you're saying. So I think for me, I was an educational snob because that's how my mama raised me, But as I got older, I began to appreciate some of the wisdom that my grandmother had, even though she didn't have a lot of education, especially as it pertained to like spiritual matters. Because even if she could not fully explain from a doctrinal, educational perspective why she believed what she believed, you knew she did. She was consistent, and I gotta give her credit for that. So it's that both and, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Cool. So my next question is, how do you feel about Christianity being used against blacks and Africans back in slavery times.
Yes, something was used against blacks and Africans. It wasn't Christianity, but it was something that they called Christianity. You know, there's actually a Bible called the Slave Bible where they ripped pages out of it because they didn't want the slaves to have access to the authentic Bible, because then they would see certain verses like you're made in the likeness and the image of God. They would see certain verses. They would see the Exodus from Egypt where the slaves escaped from Pharaoh. You know what I'm saying? So there was a slave Bible that they only let them read certain passages, because if they knew the truth, they would see that they are made equal to their slave masters. So I would say more than anything, it was abused to keep them bound. But if they had an authentic version, because the authentic version of Christianity, Jesus says, you know, to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, y'all not doing that to y'all slaves. The authentic version tells a story of a good Samaritan, you know what I'm saying, or tells a story in Philemon of Onesimus, who was a slave, and Paul said, no, you need to let him go. You know what I'm saying? If he really your brother in Christ, let him go. So these are verses that were hidden from us for so long. Right. And I think the black community has a tendency, and this is where scholarship is important, because we don't do our studies, has a tendency to label Christianity as a slave religion and say, oh, this is just something that the white man perpetuates against us. Not understanding that it was in Asia and Europe and Africa and Ethiopia way before it hit Europe. You know what I'm saying? But some European brothers got it and decided to start doing some colonization.
Okay.
Colonization. Well, my question, man, is where do we go to get the proper research for that? Because it's so foundationally important for us to know that piece of information, because everybody that we talk to has this, what did you call it, the Americanization of Christianity, and doesn't really have a roots, knowledge, and foundation and scholarship of what Christianity is. Where are some places we can just research that up, just for the audience, for ourselves, because it's important to make sure that we are our first and second resource.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I think, you know, my brother Vincent Bantu is an incredible scholar, a leader. He's heady, but he's dope. Lisa Fields has a site called the Jude 3 Project. You know, you can follow her, Jude 3. My brother Esau McCauley has a book called Reading While Black. You know, reading the Bible while black, I believe it is. There's some great thinkers around this that just, here's the problem, man. Honestly, problem one is those who control the narrative, you know, control history. You know what I'm saying? So because our narrative was kept at bay and they did the writing, well, they got to write what history was and what history wasn't. You know what I'm saying? And we are an oral tradition. You know, the black community come from an oral tradition, so we didn't write everything down. So that don't mean that the history ain't true. And so unfortunately, a lot of stuff wasn't written down, but some stuff was, and that's the stuff that it's important to dig and find. And you may have to travel. You know, if you can't read, travel. You know, I went to Egypt. That was one of the most mind-altering experiences for me, because I went to a Coptic church in Egypt and I saw a picture of Apostle Mark, and his skin was my color. And I was like, you know, so some of it is just travel, getting outside of this box. We live in a box. You start Googling stuff, you're gonna get, the algorithm's gonna give you American answers, and most of the American answers are gonna be from white men. It's just the box we live in.
So one of the things that, you know, we had said earlier is we were abused, and I think that, you know, that obviously physically, but also in terms of when it comes to religion, because it's speaking on like the people that go and get educated and why they start turning is because we start to see kind of like red flags. Like even we're talking about, you know, you're talking about the people that wrote the Bible. You know, in the Bible it says King James Version. So for certain people right there, it's like, well, why am I going to listen to this looking at the heritage of what happened? So what would you say to like the people that say, you know, religion is something that you come to when you're broken, or religion is something that you have to dumb yourself down to really accept?
Ironically, I say they right. in a weird way. Ironically, not dumb yourself down, but I mean, why do you need a God if you your own God? You know, broken people need a God.
Humble yourself.
Yeah, why? If I'm straight, I don't need you. You know, and that's why typically it's when people come to their wits' end that they do decide to start turning to a higher power, because they've figured out the finite power within it. Like, oh, I'm not all knowing. I'm not all powerful. I don't have all the answers, all the solutions. I can't figure it all out. And so when you get to that place, then you do start saying, all right, maybe there's more out here than just me. So I think the brokenness is correct. The dumb yourself down, I don't think that's true, because first of all, man, this is the crazy part about it, man. We spent hours digging for conspiracy theories. We spent hours learning about Cardi B's new clothes and what's going on with her and Offset. And we spend 10 minutes researching the Bible. We like YouTube scholars when it comes to the Bible. Like, oh yeah, I saw a YouTube video that said that Kemet in the ancient Ankh is the cross and the sun is a poly. This ain't even real, dog. It's like, really, bro? Is that what you would do for your finances?
Yeah, how many people have read the Bible completely? So
you feel me?
You lose a lot of people right there.
You feel me? Yeah, so it's like, man, come on, at least put some effort into it. Put some scholarship into it if you gon', you know, take it that route. I did the same thing with, you know, I studied Islam for like 2 years before, you know, I could even, because I was interested. You know, like, man, is this who God is? You know, I wasn't just gonna throw it off because it didn't. Now, I was like, I like pork chops, bro, so I don't know about this. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna have to convince me. It took me 2 years to come to the conclusion that it's okay for me to eat bacon in the morning, but it took me some scholarship.
You definitely need to put them pork chops down. That's not the thing to do there, but one of the things that I say, I think that it also gets lost because the Bible is something that was written and recorded, and you know I don't know how many, well, over 2,000 years, but we're clearly in a different time period now. I mean, we got things that are advancing so fast, AI going on, that's going crazy. Man, that's a whole different conversation there. But some things I feel like, I just feel like they don't hit as much. You know, just for me personally.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense because it's a historical book, and it was written for a historical people at a particular time. And sometimes you have to learn how to extract the principles and not the actual, like, what does a head covering have to do with me today? You know what I'm saying? Like, or what does, you know, don't thresh the grain of your farm. Like that don't. But what's the principle? That's really what it takes time to extract, is the principle that's trying to be given out. And so in the same way, you know, we got black parables. We got stuff in the African American community, you know what I'm saying? That's like, don't burn your bridges. Well, I don't got no bridge, you know, but we know what the principle is. Right, you know what I'm saying? So it's learning how to extract the principles and apply them to your life today. Yeah.
You know, in terms of extracting principles, you said you ran to Islam and you were genuinely interested in Islam for over 2 years. One thing that I ended up running to was initially it was psychology and philosophy, but I found a lot of interest in Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, right? And the thing that I gathered from those is that semantics plays a huge role in just our understanding of life. It's metaphorically the finger pointing at the moon. We mistake the symbol for what the symbol is symbolizing. So when we speak on, I want to say you said this too, when we speak on, okay, this is God, I think we put too much value and emphasis on that word and then that sound, but really, God is something that it's a relationship. It's something you feel inside yourself. It's when you walk out and you feel that wind just brush by your face, or that sun just mush all over your body. That's what God is, and you really tap into that. And I've noticed with language, it distorts our perception, and we have a lack of perception of what life really is and what God really is. I'm really interested in your thoughts on semantics and language and how it distorts our perception of spirituality and religion.
Let me tell you, man, if you ain't been in a black barbershop then you ain't qualified to talk about semantics, because them cats can go on and on about all kinds of things. You see what I'm saying? There ain't no J in the English language, bro. You talking about Jesus, but J ain't in the English language. Matter of fact, the word J comes from a German construct, and you can just start going down the line of some of those type of conversations, and I've had plenty of them. I think that language is interesting. You know what I'm saying? Because unfortunately, what we don't realize is, when we're reading the Bible specifically, right, it's a transliteration of another language. It does not translate word for word, so you get some stuff that is at times misinterpreted because of language and culture. And so, like, for instance, the New Testament is written in Greek. Well, there's a middle voice. We don't have a middle voice. A middle voice, we have an active voice or a passive voice. I went to the store. I'm going to the store. They have a middle voice where it's like you're joining in with someone who's going to the store. Like that concept doesn't translate into our language. So a lot of times we get hung up on semantics because certain things we have to, again, it takes, again, I want to stress on our pastors to be more scholarly, to be able to break certain things down for folks so that they grasp it. A lot of times, in the Proverbs, it says their throat is an open grave. And my brain immediately starts thinking of a graveyard and graves in the ground. But for them, their graves were holes in the wall. And so I'm like, oh, you know what I'm saying? It's culturally a different context. There's certain words. In Jesus, in the Beatitudes, he says, blessed are the meek shall inherit the earth, and different things like that. Well, blessed doesn't mean what we think it means in our cultural context. You got to understand what it meant for them and then pull it in. It means more like congratulations. So now you got to scratch your head and say, why is he saying congratulations? So back to your point, when somebody says God, well, God is not the name of the Hebrew God. That's like a term we use to acknowledge an all-powerful being, but it's not God's name. You can get really deep and get into like Father. Why they use that term is a patriarchal culture, society. But then you get into Proverbs, it talks about wisdom is a she. And so now you're like, all right, so what are we dealing with? But again, a lot of that takes scholarship. It takes time, and folks do not want to put that time and energy into it. But I feel like if we did, or at least if pastors did, we see a different look in our American culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where do you think we proceed going forward with that issue? Because I feel as if right now that is one of the most important things in moving forward, because the way that we talk, it frames the way we think and the way we live. I mean, even think about growing up. When you're 2 to 3 years old, you are looking for meaning. What is this? Okay, what does that sound? What does that sound mean? What does this scribble mean? And we're just looking for symbols so we can fit into society instead of course, what they're symbolizing. And I feel like there's a disconnect there, even when we give a child a name. Me personally, in my spirituality, I have, I guess you could call it two selves. I have me, Jalen, the name that was thrust upon me, and everything this life societally comes with. But I understand myself as a part of everything. I am a part of everything, and everything is a part of me. It's the same metaphor when God said, he said, I am in your heart. I'm waiting for you to understand that I am here as well. And that's my fundamental identity, and that's how I choose to cope, not even cope with life, just to thrive through life and live through life. But, I'm just wondering how we can take that out of people, for lack of better words, and provide something better. Because I feel like this illusion of separation is really the root of a lot of suffering.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because for me, because my faith is so tantamount to who I am as a person, I'm willing to put in the work. When hip hop was the primary source in my life, I put in the work. I studied the greats. I listened to all their tapes. I had the lyrics memorized. I broke down the metaphors. I looked, I think it's like how important is it to us? Because if it's that important, I feel like we'll do the digging. I just think that, unfortunately, you know, in an existential society, we just value what feels good. And what feels good, oftentimes, we mistake for satisfaction. So we often will choose the moment over the movement. We'll often choose what tastes good over what's best for us. You know what I'm saying? And I think,
I like that.
yeah, I think as it pertains to spirituality or spiritual things, it's so much easier to just be like, man, I want to do what satisfies my animalistic tendencies. I don't want to think about the spiritual soul component of who I am. So if I got to start thinking about that, and that interferes with being able to sleep with who I want to sleep with, eat what I want to eat, drink what I want to drink, go where I want to go, I'm not really willing to do that digging, because the animalistic aspect of me just enjoys it. The problem, though, is that I am not satisfied. I am not healthy. I don't like where I'm at as a person. And so it's like a drug addict. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I love the drugs. I hate what it's doing to me. And so all that to say is like, man, I think we got to we have to be honest with ourselves and say, how important is this? You know, to me, it became so important that I was willing to put in the work. But that's a process, man. Wow. Yeah.
All right, Craig. So, like I said, we got deep on this one. One of the things that I really wanted to ask you, because we're talking about how words have specific power, but then we also said that a lot of times people go with what feels good, and I feel like that's present today in today's music primarily. Like we want to hear the booming beats. We want to hear what's gonna get up and make us dance. Yeah. So, how much of an impact is lyricism present here in Reach Records versus having a booming beat, dope production?
Yeah, it's tough because, again, we talking about culture, and culture is so transient. You got some folks who they do not pay attention to lyrics. They just like the cadence, how did he ride the beat, how was the beat. And so you gotta understand that. But then on the flip side, you got people who all they think about is the lyrics. You know what I'm saying? Are you lyrically gifted? Are you a lyricist? I feel like I have my personal philosophy. You know, the great poet Lil Wayne, I feel like figured out the formula for being able to care about the craft of lyricism, but also understand where the culture was and how to say it in a dope way, to where those who knew, but those who didn't, you know, maybe could learn and appreciate it, but would still appreciate how he's riding the beat. So all that to say, what I hope for Reach Records, I know what I try to do personally, what I hope for Reach Records is that, man, our content and our lyrics are meaningful and profound, but that we understand where the culture is and ride the beat and put the production up at the same value level, to where those people who really ain't paying attention to lyrics end up reciting things that are like life-giving to them. Like, shoot.
It's a little putting power in your words.
Yeah, like, shoot. As I think about that, dang. You know what I'm saying?
That one hit me.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the hope.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Another question that I have, like on a personal note, is like, how do you feel about certain pastors and churches stealing money from the congregation, the people? Because me personally, not to get too off topic, but you know, when I was like little and whatnot, like me and my grandmother, so my pop's moms, we used to go, you know, to the small churches and whatnot down the country, and it's like you had to go to dress up, you had to do it Wednesday, you had to pay tithes and offering, and I'm just sitting there like, yo, like, I'm looking at her like, hey, bro, like, we need this money because, like, we in the hood, like, we in trailer parks, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's what I'm saying. So it's just, a lot of stuff just as a kid, it just didn't make sense to me. Like, I'm like, yo, like you're giving like your money to these people, but yet like what are they doing for us?
Right.
Because like last time I checked, you know, our condition is not so good.
Right. And man, you know, shame on anybody, specifically a pastor, who is functioning like that. You know what I'm saying? What I always have to force myself to remember is that that's a reflection on that individual, not a reflection on the collective. And so if I see a black dude robbing somebody, I can't sit back and be like, that's why I don't fool black people. Because that's a reflection of that individual. That's not a reflection of black people as a whole. And I think a lot of times we'll say, pastor stole money. That's why I don't fool with the church. That's a reflection of that individual, not a reflection of the church as a whole. Because meanwhile, there's a pastor somewhere in Mississippi who broke as a joke, giving his last dime to make sure kids eat on the streets, making sure that they taken care of, giving them food, going to, my grandma was like that. You know, she was an evangelist doing the food banks and making sure everybody in the neighborhood ate. So I've seen both sides. I just think nobody should be doing that. We feel especially hurt by pastors because they're supposed to be beacons of light. They're supposed to have a standard. But I'm gonna be just as pissed off at my financial advisor for stealing money as I'm gonna be if the pastor's stealing money. Because I trusted you. You know what I'm saying? I trusted you. So, but I gotta remember it's a reflection of this individual and not the whole. You know what I mean?
And that's a sermon right there, because I feel like we have a tendency to generalize too much. We try to demolish the whole apple tree for a few bad apples, for lack of better words. Just because this pastor took some money from this church, we have a tendency to say, well, all these, see, this is why I can't mess with church. Because it's a trauma response. And I feel like our culture right now is a generation of trauma responses. So especially in our black community, there's this whole conversation of men ain't nothing and women ain't nothing, right? But you know, we not gonna say it. We not gonna say it. You know what I'm saying? But like, and I talk about this all the time, man. I'm like, look, I understand that you were hurt by a few individuals. Even let's be exaggerative and say, okay, 100 people ended up hurting you. Yeah. It's unfair to place those 100 people and then now put that blame on the rest of the billions of people out there. Right. It's a trauma response, and that trauma response just begs for trauma healing on all levels, on this life and genetically. Which brings me to my final question for you. Deconstruction. My favorite song of your album, on Church Close 4, is Deconstruction. And it's Deconstruction. And Deconstruction, the way you explained it in the song and in interviews, was specifically powerful for me because I related to it on all levels. Because in order to break down the broken lessons that were given to you, you have to literally demolish it all and then come back full circle and build it brick by brick by brick by brick. How would you describe, and as potently as you can, your spiritual deconstruction as Lecrae?
Mine, I think there's a healthy deconstruction and then there's an unhealthy. Mine was unhealthy. So I'll be honest with that. I think, let's talk about a healthy one first. A healthy deconstruction says, hey, I'm not sure what I believe about this. I'm not gonna make any rash changes or make any like crazy turns based off of my breakdown of my views or philosophies. I'm going to take some time and try to wrestle with this. You know what I'm saying? That's a healthy way to deconstruct. I think unhealthy is, see, I knew this was fake. I'm finna do what I want to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, nothing matters and I don't care, I'm hurt and it's all a wrap. And now you start giving in to your most base animalistic desires, and your excuse for destroying yourself, whether that's emotionally, physically, mentally, is that everything that you've believed is a lie. And so that now gives you permission to go on a tirade and be destructive, you know what I'm saying, towards yourself or other people. I think that was unhealthy, and that's what I did, right? Because I didn't have the tools. you know, to process that. So for me, I was hurt by the church people, and because of that, that became my scapegoat to do what I wanted to do. Because y'all was on my head, and now I have permission to live out my most base animalistic desires and tendencies, regardless of how much trauma that causes me, or pain it causes people around me. You know what I'm saying? Or pain to my liver because there's too much alcohol or drugs or whatever you want to call it. The thing that has sustained all societies has been moralism. At the very least, there's got to be a moral. It's got to be wrong to kill that man over there. It's got to be. Regardless of your theological views or what God you believe in or don't believe in, there's got to be a wrong or a right. If you throw that away, now you're in trouble. So the problem for me was I couldn't even hold on to that. And I think for me, what I know now, obviously, is that, man, even if I didn't subscribe to Jesus, I still think Christianity would produce healthy results. We have hospitals because of Christianity. We have clothes donations, adoption. All that is based off of Christianity. Like, that's who invented those things, right? Those are just the principles. I think that would have been healthy, but I threw those things away. And what I wish I would have done versus what I did, what I wish I would have done was I wish I would have said, hey, you know what? I do believe Christ is real. There's too much evidence to say he's not. But clearly what I've learned about him is not. So let me tear down everything I've learned about him and rebuild around that foundation. It didn't work that way for me. I had to go find out that he was real again. Okay, he's real. So who is he? Now, okay, I know who he is. He's not who they said he was. He definitely ain't who Donald Trump said he was. So who is he? Okay, now who did the Ethiopians say he is? Who did the Germans say he is? Who did the Jews say he is? And then I had to start building around those realities until I came to a healthy place where my faith, I'm just okay with that. I'm okay with the fact that it's not gonna match your typical person in America, but my foundation is solid. I'm good.
And how'd you get there? Scholarship.
Yeah, you had to take some time. You got to dig.
Yeah, I like what you said there about you know, the base is having moralism, and you know that's what you have to recognize in each different religion. You know, even though you may be Christian, you may be, you know, Muslim, you may be a Buddhist. At the core, there are certain values that just come down to moralism, and you have to weigh the pros versus the cons. Okay, we may hear about a pastor stealing out the church, but at the same time, look at all of these community centers. Look at all of these, you know, helping women pay rent that are single mothers. Look at all the good things that are happening. So you can't get distracted by the distractions. You just have to, like you said, be rock solid in your faith and have a base level of moralism.
Yeah, man. Yeah, at the very least. Come on now, fam. Come on now, man.
Sir. But Lecrae, this was dope. This was deep.
Yeah,
This
man.
is,
I appreciate y'all, man.
Yes, sir. It was an honor to come here and, you know, and build and just learn so much from you. I feel like I sat in a church sermon right now.
Well, I appreciate y'all's bravery and just like honesty. Like, it takes a lot to be transparent about your views, and you know, that'd be my challenge to anybody. Wherever you at with your faith or views, it's like, man, own that, because you ain't gonna grow, you ain't gonna learn. You know what I mean? When I was around my Christian homies before I was a Christian, I was like, nah, I don't believe that. And then at least they knew who they was dealing with. You know what I'm saying? It's like I don't believe it. But I respect y'all. You know, I'm gonna come to Bible study. I'm just letting you know where I'm at. You know what I'm saying?
Because the pathway to growth is through honesty. Honesty is the number one thing that got me through my life. So I love this conversation, man. Church closed 4. Please go get that. The whole thing hard. His whole discography is hard, to be honest. So thank you, Lecrae, for blessing us with your presence. Thank you, King. Real, you got anything to say?
Man, I wish I got some flowers right now, but I'm gonna do this in spirit. I want to say thank you so much for, you know, inspiring me from, like, you know, a little boy to now a man. Because like I said, like, you know, my father, he grew me up on you and a lot of Christian rap artists in the game right now. And thank you so much for what you've done for the culture and what you continue to do.
Much love.
And yeah, that's it.
Much love. Yeah, man.
Well, we about to wrap this up. To our followers, this episode will be on all platforms. This will be the first one. So once again, Lecrae, we just want to thank you from the Peace of Mind podcast.